Blessings to you all here today. We've been brought together by a common or mutual faith in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, the paths of practice. Ajahn used to call the lay devotees seekers of Dhamma. So we all come together tonight because we're seeking Dhamma, seeking the truth. One thing we all have in common. We have enough faith that we're here at this time, at this temple, and we have a desire, wish, a wholesome wish to realize the truth or understand the truth, to free ourselves from suffering and the ignorance that causes suffering. And that's something I think all of us have in common, is that we all want to be free from suffering. And so we have a link or a common interest to find out what the Buddha taught and how we can use that in our life, in our practice, to further improve ourselves as human beings. Nobody forced you to come here tonight, I don't think. You're here because you want to be here. And that's because you have faith. Faith is interest and energy that comes from hearing the Dhamma, meeting with fellow Dhamma practitioners, hearing the words of the Buddha or reading the words of the Buddha. Gives you faith, and it gives you a sense of confidence that what you're doing is something worthwhile. And that's why you're here. You're here voluntarily. You're a volunteer tonight. But you're not here to volunteer or do any particular work. You're volunteering to hear the Dhamma and practice the Dhamma because it's something important to you. And this is where the beginning of our practice comes from. We're giving importance to the words of the Buddha, the teachings of the Buddha, and also giving importance to this place because it's a place of practice of the Dhamma. That doesn't mean to say you can't practice somewhere else. It doesn't mean you can't seek the truth somewhere else. You can. But a Buddhist monastery or a Buddhist temple is specifically established for pursuing the Dhamma practice, for study, for meditation, for chanting and so on. Set up for that. But when you go home, you can still practice. Maybe not so ideal as when you're here, but it's still possible to practice anywhere. But really the real place of practice is where it's right here, is your own heart, in your own body, your own mind, your own heart, right here, right now is your place of practice. And when you go home, you take this body with you. So when you go home, the place of practice is going with you. As you sit in your car or on the bus, when you reach home, you're taking the place of practice with you because it's wherever you are, it's the place of practice. Many people misunderstand this, don't they? They think to practice the Dhamma, you have to go somewhere, to go to the temple, or go to the Buddhist center. And they may be ideal places to practice, better places, but you can't always go to a temple. Maybe you're busy with work or other activities. But that doesn't mean to say you can't practice the Dhamma at home or in these other places. So what we have to learn to do is how to bring the Dhamma into our normal experience of life as well, when we're in the temple, on a retreat, or listening to a teaching, following some program. That's a good start. But then we also have to learn how to apply these teachings and these practices for ourselves when we're not in a temple. For some people, the only time they get to the temple is when they're in a coffin. They spent their life, maybe they call themselves a Buddhist, but the only time they really enter the monastery or the temple is at the end of their life. That's a bit too late. Or other people, they have this thought, well, practicing the Buddhist teachings is a good idea, and I want to do it, but I'm a bit too busy at the moment with family, friends, work, so I'll go to the temple later. When I'm a bit older, my kids have grown up, I retired from my job, maybe then I'll go to the temple. And of course, it's much harder to learn how to meditate and learn this Dhamma that we are practicing and learning when you're old. Your eyes don't work so well, your ears don't work so well, your brain doesn't remember so well. So don't wait until you're old. Get into these good habits of practicing regularly when you're young, or as young as you can be. And don't wait till you to go to the temple to practice. You may not get the chance to go to the temple, so practice at home. That's also important, learning how to practice the Dhamma when you're on your own. Can you do it? Like we just finished a retreat today. When there's a retreat schedule, or other people are meditating and there's a program, well, of course, it's fairly easy to follow along. But when you go home, what do? Do you just give it all up? Some people, they do their 7-day retreat, their 10-day retreats, and that's really good. But then they go home and that's it, finish. Nothing else. And very common that here we just put our effort into the practice for a short space of time and then we go on, nothing is continued. But actually the Buddha encouraged us to practice every day. We may adapt our practice depending on the place and the situation, but every day we can practice this Dhamma. And we have many opportunities to practice, and often we forget that. We all know practicing dana and generosity is kind of at the base or the beginning of the practice. And that's important because we have to learn how to help each other. But there's many ways of practicing dana. Really, dana is a state of mind. It's having the intention to give, to share, to help. So some people think, well, you can only practice dana when you're at a temple, when you have lunch, offer food to monks. And that's a very important thing as well, because if monks don't get food, then we starve. So it is important to offer food to monks, but it's not the only form of that. Well, there's many ways we donate. Like in this temple, people donate their time, their skills, their knowledge, and not just to support the Sangha, but we support charities, associations, charitable trusts, different kinds of organizations, we volunteer and so on. All of this is the practice of dana. And yesterday somebody asked a question, what are the characteristics of a Sotapanna, one who's already reached the first stage of enlightenment? For one of the characteristics of a Sotapanna is they no longer have stinginess, which means they've obviously practiced dana enough to the point where it's just natural for their mind to want to share or be ready to share. So if somebody comes and asks the Sotapanna, I need some help, they'll tend to give. If they can, they'll give some help, because they're not stingy anymore. So practicing dana, practicing generosity, kindness, sharing, this is something that we have to practice on a regular basis. not just in the temple. That's where you do the intensive course. You come to the temple and you really try, you offer and you help. That's good. But when you go, oh, are you still keeping up some of that dana practice? When you're at home, this dana is really a state of mind, isn't it? It's the intention to share, to give, to help. And it's something we also have to learn. Sometimes when we're beginning our practice, we're not yet very good at it. No, I wasn't very good at practicing dana when I first became a Buddhist. You go to the temple, you kind of feel awkward, not sure what to give or how to give, what's the best way to give. Or in other situations where maybe somebody needs your help, you're not quite sure if you're too shy, or you're not sure if you're imposing on them or something. So even the practice of dana, very ordinary dana, is something you have to learn, training. It's a form of training. What you're really training is your mind, isn't it? Your mind is becoming familiar with giving, sharing, letting go of some of your attachments, to the point where your stinginess disappears. And you're not too worried about, how much money you've got and all these things. Of course, you still have to pay bills, you have to earn a living and pay bills and look after yourself. But here we're talking about the state of mind. You have to learn how to develop this state of mind of giving and sharing. Sort of like, say, over there in the hall, we have a statue of Sila. He's famous as a monk who is foremost in giving, or having given in the past. He's given so much that wherever perhaps Sila walked or wandered in the forest, people would always come out of nowhere to give him food. If there were monks with him, they'd support those monks because of the power of the giving he'd done in the past. It's coming back to him. So that's why Buddhists love to have a statue of Sila around, because they know it's good for business, good for money, good for wealth, because they're hoping that if they have the statue there, it will bring some of this goodness back to them. But really, it's the barani of Sila, having given so much over so many lifetimes. He becomes symbolic with this act of giving. But it's something you have to share and train. I mean, sometimes we have it, but sometimes we forget it or we lose it. Sometimes we become afraid that we won't have enough ourselves, selfies. And something as simple as giving is something you practice, training. It comes from intention. So even the Buddha acknowledged Sila is very, very far meaning of this, that sometimes the Buddha is walking through the jungle and they're not sure, there are a lot of monks there, and they're not sure whether they'll get enough food, so he asks, and is Sila with us? And they would check, yeah, Sila is with us. The Buddha say, okay, we can go this way, the way where there's not many villages, not many towns, because we've got Sila with us. Something will happen. We'll be okay. That's barani, isn't it? That Sila has this barani of dana barani, so it draws the goodness out of people. So Ajahn Chah was a bit like that when he first went to England. He went to, before the monks had even gone to England for his monastery in Thailand, Ajahn Sumedho was having a few doubts. If we go to England to live, is anyone going to feed us? Because Ajahn Sumedho knew what it's like in a non-Buddhist country. They see monks, they don't say, oh, can I give you some food or give you some help? They see monks, they run away. Scared or not comfortable with monks because they're not familiar with them. And certainly most people in non-Buddhist countries don't know how to help monks. But Ajahn Chah said, well, are there any good people in England? Ajahn Sumedho thought, yeah, there's some good people. Well, what the monks do, they go into a new place, they draw the goodness out of people's hearts, so then they want to start supporting the monks. That's one of the roles of monks in the world is we are mendicants, we are dependent on lay people, so we draw the generosity out of people. It's not forced, you don't compel people to be generous, but your lifestyle makes them think, oh, the monks need food, let's see what we can do. It brings the generosity out. So Ajahn Chah experienced that. They went to England and people would support monks and they brought food, and eventually even one man offered a whole forest. And that forest, it's called Chiphurst Forest, is the first land that was offered to the Sangha of Ajahn Chah. They purchased that, it would have cost a lot of money, but the owner offered it. And so everyone says that's Ajahn Chah's Bharani. And that happens all over the Buddhist world, not just with Ajahn Chah, but it's an example of how when somebody is practicing, particularly Sangha, it draws this goodness out of people. Just like this place, Pali Light Temple, draws the goodness out of you and other people like yourself. You're drawn in here, a bit like a magnet, pulls you in. It's not anyone forcing you to come. But you have this interest in truth, in training and practicing, and there's opportunities to meditate, opportunities to offer dharma, so you come. Draws the goodness out of you. But still, we have to practice, don't we? We have to practice this. Sometimes we feel very generous, very keen to help and do good things, and sometimes we don't. Our mind is maybe not yet established in the Dhamma, so sometimes we still have our stinginess, possessiveness, and not quite sure whether we're ready to help. So we see that with newcomers to Buddhism. So where I live in Australia, sometimes maybe an Australian family with the children come, the parents say to the child, oh, maybe you could make a donation to the Sangha. They give them the $5 bill or $10 bill or something. But they put it over there in the donations box. And the little kid walks over and they look at the $5 bill and they think, we could buy a lot of sweets with it. They turn around to mum or dad and said, if we spend this on sweets, we'll get a lot of sweets. Mum said, put it in the donation. So even kids are learning, aren't they? They actually done a lot of research on babies. They'll be 1 or 2 years old, 3 years old, but they're just starting to talk and interact with other children. And the research indicates that quite naturally, babies, young children, are generous. They like to share. They have a toy they like to give, share it with their friends. But then by the time they're 5 or 6 years old, they learn to be more stingy and selfish. I don't know where they're getting it from. Maybe they're getting it from mum and dad. I don't know. Because as you grow up, you actually become a little bit more self-centered, don't you? Because you're being told to be focused on your education. Don't waste time with other people. Don't give your things away. You're actually encouraged to be more selfish as you grow up. You've got to get educated, get ahead, get your qualifications, get a good job so you could make more money. And that's not necessarily wrong, but at the same time, you tend to get built in with that, or coming with that is the idea that you should be ambitious, getting ahead for yourself. Sense of individual identity forms the older we get. So you lose some of your innocence and your natural generosity because you become more focused on yourself and getting on in life. And we have to work harder as we get older sometimes to counter the stinginess or the more selfish attitudes that come up. Sometimes you see people, if you're too generous, it's like you're foolish. Only foolish people give or share their things. They actually think it's not wise. And of course, you can be unwise in the way you practice generosity. Sometimes people give without thinking and maybe give in the wrong way or the wrong kind of thing. But generally speaking, our culture now is not encouraging us to be generous, it's encouraging us to be selfish. It's just the habits we're picking up. So actually the practice of generosity that we get from Buddhism pervades the Buddhist teachings. Generosity leads on to renunciation, letting go, and if you're practicing meditation, what are you doing? You're practicing letting go. You're holding on to certain thoughts and ideas, emotions. As you practice mindfulness, you're letting things go. That is a direct, as you might call it, a maturity of the practice of generosity and Dhamma. They say no jhana without Dhamma. It's very difficult to let go of your thoughts and your worries and your fears and your anger if you've never practiced any external generosity. So it's something we have to learn, and we have to keep learning, keep practicing, because our cultural input, society, cultures, is not that supportive. I'm not saying Singapore or any other country has people don't practice generosity. They do, of course, but there's a lot of pressure to be selfish, more self-centered, and the great happiness with having more, owning more, getting ahead. Maybe you practice generosity if there's a tax break involved, okay? And sometimes corporate generosity is all. But actually, generosity in the sense of the Buddhist path to enlightenment, it's also just something like a very spontaneous thing. It's just that willingness to let go in a situation, to help, to share, to feed, to help people around you, or just give time, give information, share information. But sometimes people are a bit stingy with their information now. You know something to do with the work that you do, you have some information that helps you do that job well, that you don't want to share it in case the other guy gets ahead of you. Or maybe when you're a student, you're studying, you learn the information and you don't really want to share it because someone else gets a better result than you. Or even in a temple, it can happen. Sometimes we get two friends who are doing dana, but one knows how to do it better than the other, but they won't share. And so they put a copyright on their dana. So how is that? Well, for example, one young lady came to the temple in Melbourne, and her mother-in-law was a really good cook. And this young lady wanted to cook for the monks, so she wanted the recipe for the food that her mother-in-law cooks really well, up for the monks. No. Copyright. Not willing to share. Even though it's for monks, it's not for her daughter-in-law, but I don't know whether it's just all mothers-in-laws and daughters-in-laws, I don't know. Hopefully not all of them, but there seems to be a little bit of rivalry there. And stinginess, isn't it? We can be stingy with our information, food, obviously our wealth. Be stingy with people. But we don't like to let our friends go to someone else. We want to keep them close because it makes us feel good. It's at wealth in people, or even sometimes your family members. You don't like your family member going off somewhere else. You want to keep them close. It's a form of stinginess. So stinginess is something to look into in many parts of our life, not just the normal one is in holding up to your possession. You can be stingy with people. Ajahn Chah used to talk about a monk who was in the monastery, and he would, like in the old days in the monasteries in Thailand, the forest monasteries, we wash our robes in jackfruit tree wood water. We chop the jackfruit tree wood, we boil up the chips, the wood chips. We get a nice brown, orangey brown color. And that's, we say it's astringent, helps to take grease and dirt out of cloth. So you not only wash your robes, but you dye your robes in this liquid we get from the jackfruit wood. And that takes a lot of work. You have to chop the firewood, you have to chop the jackfruit tree wood, boil it up, make the dye. And then you wash your robes, you hang your robes out, you have to keep the fire going. So it's like a one-day operation. It's a big big event in the monastery. It's a lot of work. But then there'd be this 1 month, we'd wait until all the other monks had lit the fire, chopped the wood, got the water boiling, and then he'd come out and he'd wash his robes and then disappear. He never held to set up, never held to clear up. Stingy. Stingy with jackfruit. So stinginess had no limit, really. Whatever your mind attaches to, whatever it becomes possessive of, can be a basis for stinginess. But a sotapanna, somebody who's progressed on the Buddhist path and has destroyed that, no longer arises in their mind. And it's something to think about, because just our cultural conditioning, whether you're in Singapore or any other part of the world, it's not teaching us to be a sotapanna. It's teaching us to get more, accumulate more, basically to be a little bit more stingy or selfish than we need to be. So there's always more you can give. Even harder than giving materially is giving of safety and forgiveness to other people, especially when they annoy you, hurt you, harm you in some ways. It's very difficult to forgive someone who's hurt your feelings through their words or their actions. There's actually another form of giving, isn't it? Giving, we say the giving of forgiveness. What it really means is the giving of safety, in that someone has hurt you, but you're not going to seek revenge and hurt them back. There's a very mature quality to have that, to be able to be hurt by someone and restrain the desire to seek revenge. At the very least, you'll say something. Earlier that so-and-so complain about them, maybe argue with them. Even worse is we physically do something to hurt them. So like in Australia, there's somebody just last week, her husband was cheating on her out with another lady. So she was so angry, she drove straight into them with a cup. So angry, just tried to destroy her. We do that, don't we? When we become angry, maybe we're jealous or possessive of something, person, or could be money or property. Well, we can seek revenge if someone tries to harm what we are. Someone harms what is ours, and we seek revenge. Or maybe it's a very subtle thing. So like you have your feeling of who you are, or we say your ego, your sense of self, and maybe someone criticizes you unjustly. It's not true at all. They say, oh, you did that wrong, or you didn't do something you should have done, and you feel hurt, and you want to get back at them. Maybe you're not brave enough to get back at them up front, so we have this other way, the backdoor way. It's called backstabbing. So does backstabbing occur in Singapore? Yeah, I think it does, because it occurs wherever you got human beings. Partly it's you wanting to get back at someone who you feel has somehow damaged you or hurt you, harmed you. So it could be even your family member, a friend, or a work colleague. And usually you seek revenge with people close to you, because they're the ones that you may have some tension with or some problems with. When we're less worried about people far away, and because they're far away and you don't have much to do with. So it's often the very people we live with or work with that we have this problem, and we want to seek revenge, but we feel somehow they've hurt us. And it comes up in our mind, doesn't it? We haven't let it go. So as long as you haven't let it go, we won't say that you're dwelling in anger, you're dwelling in aversion. It's like your mind has become a dwelling place for anger. Because you haven't forgiven, you haven't let go. You're holding on. So it's another form of dana. It's actually the giving away of this anger. You just let it go. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that person will improve either. That person may still be a difficult person. Some people are. But you're not going to dwell in anger when you think of them. You know what they like. maybe very tiring, very difficult, but you won't hold on to the anger. Because if you hold on to the anger, you're suffering. This is a much harder kind of dana than just giving us food or some donation or something. To give up your anger for someone who's hurt your feelings, hurt you in some way. It's very tricky. You have to work at it. But it's very rewarding when you do it because your mind becomes free. Just as when you give away some material thing, you become free in the mind, free of the attachment to that material thing. When you give away your anger to another person, you're saying, I'm not going to act on my angry thoughts. I'm not going to go in and hurt you, say something or do something to get revenge in your life. Let it be. It's a difficult one, but it's necessary, isn't it? If you're going to clean out your mind, you have to do it. You have to work at it. You have to practice at it. And it may take a long time. You might have to do it over and over again. You keep thinking of that person, you're still angry. But finally you realize if I hold on to my anger towards that person, seeking revenge, I'm suffering. I'm not going to be free from this suffering until I let go. So one way the Buddha said you can let go of that anger is you put yourself in their position. So if there's somebody who has done something very harmful to you or other people that you love, have done something bad, repeatedly do something bad, you put your mind in their mind, you put yourself in their self, and you realize they're making a lot of bad karma for themselves, by hurting other people. That bad karma, that's going to come back on them. It's not going to make them happy in what they're doing, it's going to make them more unhappy. Once you realize that, then you realize there's not much you need to do to go and hurt them, because they're already hurting themselves. If you really pursue it a bit further, your anger actually turns into compassion. And you realize, well, that person who says so many bad things and does those bad things, they're causing so much suffering for themselves. You start to feel sorry. Anger can actually turn into compassion. You realize they're having a miserable life. Maybe the reason they act in those ways is because they're not happy. There are all kinds of problems, and it's coming back on them. When you put yourself in their shoes or in their heart, put your heart in their heart, you realize that, and then you're willing to let go. Because you realize you don't need to be angry with them anymore. They're already causing themselves enough suffering. You don't need to add on to it. But the mind of revenge is, well, I want to get them back. You want to make them suffer, see them suffer. Or the only one who's really suffering is you. You're sort of angry. They're holding on. So it's another form of Dhamma. You're not saying you're perfect or anything like that. You're saying, oh, I still have anger, but I'm not going to harm anyone else. If you want to attain some samadhi, which is another quality of this other part of this Buddhist path, you have to learn to do this. You have to let go of this kind of anger. If you're still holding grudges, you're not going to enter samadhi, because it will keep coming up. You remember that person, what they said, what they did, and it will be a problem. You have to be willing to put it down. It's a really tricky one, but it's necessary. It's partly is done through the practice of dana, compassion, understanding what's going on. And if you're still angry with another person here, some grudge, you're suffering. You're holding on. It's not there anymore. There's some people who hold on to a grudge for a long time, 5 years, 10 years. And that means they've suffered all that time. It means their mind won't settle down because they're not willing to put it down. Our monks learned this in our monastery. In our monastery in Melbourne, we have kangaroos. When kangaroos have babies, they become very possessive with their babies. And if a monk walks too close to the kangaroo, monk doesn't like it. And then that monk becomes a marked man. And every time that monk walks through the forest or the monastery, the mountain sees him, the mountain starts to bounce towards him. Revenge. One kangaroo got so angry that one of the monks actually chased him down to the Dhamma hall like this and tried to follow him into the Dhamma hall. He had to run in to get away from Mum, shut the door. His mum was battering the door down to get in after him because she was so angry with him because he annoyed her or got too close to her baby. So you notice that with animals, they don't let go. It's partly as they love their baby, of course, but they also hold grudge that they remember. Or there's another bird in Australia, it's called the magpie. Magpie are very smart and then very good memory, and they remember who their enemy is. So if they pick on a monk and they don't like that monk, maybe the monk does something and threatens them or something, then that magpie is after that monk for the rest of the season. Can be for many months. Swoop down, gets that monk, sees the monk coming. They're not just humans that seek revenge. Magpies, kangaroos, animals, they have memories as well. So this is dana, but on a very refined level. The dana of giving up your anger, your desire to seek revenge. You're making yourself safe for the world. Okay, there are some bad people out there, or some people do bad things, but I'm not going to fight them back, hurt them. Doesn't mean to say you can't protect yourself. Yes, you can protect yourself, but you're not going to seek revenge and hold on to those thoughts. And it's quite a tricky kind of dana. If you perfected it, then your mind will enter samadhi very easily. Everyone wants samadhi, don't. Because I've been talking to some of you over the weekend. When am I going to get my samadhi? When is my mind going to be peaceful? I will practice this. Practice dana, practice forgiveness, practice letting go, and your mind will settle down in samadhi quicker and easier. If you become an expert, you become like some of those monks, the disciples of Luang Por Mang. You have pictures of them around here. And the one I like to remember is Luang Por Chuan. He lived in a monastery on a rocky kind of mountain in Honeypong, northeast Thailand. Some caves, cliffs. It's a very kind of special place, very beautiful place. And he had very good meditation, jhana, very peaceful monk, very wise monk. And one day he's sitting in a cave meditating, and outside the cave he could hear gunshots. And in northeast Thailand they love to hunt. Every guy has a gun. When they get a chance they go to the forest to shoot something, anything. Basically anything. There's anything that moves, shoot it. So they're prolific hunters, and he could hear the shots coming, so he knew something was being chased by the hunters. And as he was meditating, he spread metta, because as an expert, he knows how to forgive, to let go, enter samadhi. He's an expert, sitting there spreading metta. And a deer ran up to the cave. Hunters love to shoot deer. The deer comes up to the cave and stands right in the center of the cave. And it's frightened. He knows that, so he just spreads metta to the deer, calm it down. Animals are very sensitive. A monk spreads metta to an animal, often they respond quite quickly. Makes them feel calm, settled, sometimes quicker than people. You spread metta to a person, they're still very angry. Hard to work with, but animals usually respond very quickly. They're sensitive. So the deer just became calm, just settled down, waiting there. But in the next moment, there was a shot. But after the shot, the deer is still standing, so it obviously wasn't hit by the bullet. But whoever fired the gun, Luang Por Chuan was sitting there meditating, he could hear the man going, in pain. So he got out, he went outside, and there'd been a hunter who'd shot at the deer, but the gun backfired. Instead of firing a bullet out at the deer, the whole gun exploded in his face. This face was all black, covered in blood. And the man was lying on the floor, holding his face, saying, Lumpo, help me, help me. And Lumpo, he saw a good opportunity, so he went down and he said, okay, I can help you, but you've got to promise me one thing first. And the man said, oh, anything, you've got to help me. I mean, stop, hey, anything. You've got to promise me you'll give up hunting. This is how monks do it, get people to keep the precepts. Oh, okay. He's promised, and he said, anything, yes, I do. He said, we got to give up hunting, killing animals. So he's agreed. So we had to get the man to agree. He did. And then he dressed his wounds and helped him, cleaned him up, sent him on his way. That's metta, a very high kind of metta, because he's getting someone to change that bad habit of killing into one of not killing. You might say that's the greatest kind of Dhamma, is Dhamma. So we have material Dhamma, giving. We have the giving of forgiveness, letting go of anger. But then Dhamma is the highest kind of giving, because that kind of information or teaching can change that man's whole destiny for the better. Change his habit of killing animals to one of not killing animals. Killing animals brings karma. This was instant karma. He's hurting himself. You try and shoot a deer that a monk is getting metta to. Things happen, don't they? The Buddha said, if you practice metta very well till your mind becomes samadhi, it protects you from bullets and arrows and knives, poisons and all the kind of dangers of the world. Lumpo spread metta to protect the deer, so that gun didn't fire. Misfired into the face of the man. It's like instant calm. And then he uses it as an opportunity to teach that man that you don't need to hunt anymore. See what happens when you hunt, you get hurt. This is your Dhamma. And the man understood it, so he agreed. Yeah, okay, I won't do this anymore. So the highest kind of Dhamma is giving the right advice, helpful advice to someone, even if it's not what they want to hear. You're telling them to change their habit, change their behavior for the better, to stop doing things that hurt. Not everyone can do that. You might know many good things that you could tell your friend or your family member, but you know if you say it, they're not going to listen to you. They'll argue with you, or they'll ignore you, and they won't take it seriously. But if it's somebody with skill, maybe they have a powerful mind, genuine sila, integrity, some wisdom and samadhi, well, in this case, the monk could teach the man successfully. That's a very special thing. Not everyone could do that. So the highest dana of all is Dhamma dana, giving people advice that really helps them. Actually, the monks give you advice that really help you every day. Then sometimes we miss it. The monk says, practice mindfulness. And we say, yes, I'll practice mindfulness. And we walk outside and reward is forgotten. Monk says, keep the 5 precepts. And say, yes. You go out and very quickly you're not keeping the 5 precepts. We forget the Dhamma, don't we? The monks say, all things are impermanent. And we go out there and something happens that annoys you and it's forgotten impermanence already. We forget the Dhamma. Even when someone gives you the best Dhamma, you forget. So we have to keep listening. That's why we have to keep coming back to the temple, listening to the Dhamma again, meditating again, because we forget. Until you're fully enlightened, there'll always be a little bit of your mind that forgets. So you have to keep topping it up. It's like you drive your car and you keep using up the fuel, gradually the fuel goes down, you have to go back and buy more fuel. You have to come back and receive more Dhamma, topping up your mind with Dhamma. Whether it's dana, sila, bhavana, these are the ways we top up our mind with Dhamma. We start to see the truth. The more you see the truth, the less your mind drops. The left, you need to top it up again, because if you're seeing the truth, you don't get lost in it. You don't forget. That's what they call insight or wisdom. The wisdom that helps cut off your suffering. It doesn't disappear from your mind. That's why it's so valuable. It stays with you. It's more valuable than money or physical assets and or properties. The wisdom that stops you suffering, creating the causes for suffering, is much more valuable because it doesn't disappear. Everything else in this world disappears, doesn't it? Even if you have money, you spend it, it's gone. Or the value of money goes up and down. You have a house or a car, well, eventually it wears out or sell it or something. But wisdom that comes from practicing and understanding suffering and the cause of suffering and what you need to do to end your suffering, that's the most valuable thing that human beings have, is because it stays with you all the time. It even goes into your next life. If you're not enlightened in this life, you go into your next life, your wisdom goes with you. Why are some people naturally wise? They're very smart, very clever in the Dhamma from a young age. And because they practiced before in a previous life, so this life already they understand many things to avoid a lot of suffering because they're wise. Material wealth doesn't go with you when you die, does it? What do they do? Last night we were outside the Mooncake Festival and they had this big bonfire. So I asked, what's in the bonfire? Money, model cars and model mobile phones and food, and they burn it all up so that their dead relatives can get it in the next life. Well, it's a nice thought for which you've read it as well, but you're burning these things. I'm not sure how much will transfer across. But if you practice the Dhamma, you understand that your mind understands the Dhamma, you gain some wisdom, insight. What did the Buddha say about wisdom? The wisdom that cuts off your suffering. He said it's the greatest, the brightest light in the world. Nati panya samanati. You can see that it's in your best interest to let go of your anger, to let go of your stinginess, to let go of your jealousy. If you can see that, you have that wisdom, your mind becomes very bright. There's no light as bright as wisdom. So the wisdom of the enlightened mind radiates in all directions, nothing can stop it. Ajahn or a Buddha, they say light up the whole universe. Even just the light of wholesome mind states. For somebody on our retreat, they attained some samadhi, so the mind became bright. It's like someone turns the light on. It may only be temporary, because samadhi is temporary, but it's still very important experience to have. Your mind brightens when you let go. We even call it, when you have a moment of insight, we call it a light bulb moment. It's like someone turns the light on and suddenly you realize what is causing you this suffering, what you must do to end it. So if you're angry with someone, jealous of someone, you realize, I better let this go. Forgive them, at least tolerate them, practice kindness towards them. If you're jealous of someone, maybe you do practice mudita. Good on them. If they're getting success in what they do, or they're happy, good for them. Let go of your jealousy. That's a light bulb moment. Your mind is realizing that anger, jealousy, grief, these are suffering. They're to be let go of, not held on to. You hold on to them, you're suffering. If you let go, you're free from suffering. So your mind brightens every time you do it. So it's like walking here, it's dark, isn't it? It's at night. You walk out in the dark. If you're in the dark, you start bumping into things. You could hurt yourself, you trip over, it's not very convenient. When you turn the light on, you can see what's there, so you don't bump into things. And in my monastery, we had wombats. You know what wombats are like? They're like these furry pigs. big size, and they walk around on the ground. And you walk around at night, and if you don't shine your torch, they don't move. When you walk up to them, they don't move, and you bump into them. Luckily, wombats, they're not very aggressive, so they'll just go, then that's it, you walk on. But if you can't see, you bump into things. You bump into trees or cars or exterior or furniture or something. When you turn the light on, you don't hurt yourself, you don't bump into things. Turning the light on is the light of wisdom. When you see in your mind what you're holding on to is causing you suffering. When you're angry, you're not letting it go. When you're confused with your own views, thinking, oh, this is good for me, but it's not. It's like your mind is in darkness at that moment. You don't realize where your suffering's coming from. Really, that's happening all the time. Constantly misinterpreting our experience and is suffering because of the economy, the price of oil, price of food in the shops, inflation. I'm suffering because of my brother or my sister or my partner or my work colleague, or suffering because I have an illness or an injury. We're always suffering because of something. But we're getting it wrong because we're always blaming these external things. We're not shining the light on our own mind here. And the light's going out there, and we're really good at blaming other people for our suffering. We're really good at that. I'm suffering because of them. You're not. Really speaking, you're suffering because of your own attachment in your mind. You're holding it to your anger, the fear, your worry, your greed. That's personal. It's not out there with those people. It's you. But you haven't got the light turned on yet, so you think it's there. So you keep hurting and just keep bumping into people. That's why we need to meditate. You practice mindfulness. It's like turning the light off. Sit there. As you become more mindful, you can see your own mental states, your intention, greed, anger, delusion. See what you're attaching to. See where your thinking is going wrong. Because you turn the light of mindfulness on, you become more still, more steady, then you can see. Ajahn is very smart. He used to say, oh, you suffer because you're thinking in the wrong way. You're saying, I'm suffering because of this person. You're not seeing suffering is actually a thought and a feeling that's arising in your own mind. If you're mindful enough, and you think, oh, let this go. Don't hold on to it. Don't cling on to it. If you can see that and let it go, you won't suffer. But what we do is we're not very mindful yet. We haven't looked very closely yet, turn the lights off, so we keep blaming the wrong thing and looking for the solution in the wrong place. So he said it's like mangy doll. If you're suffering, then you're like a mangy doll. Why? Well, the mangy doll has mange, itchy skin disease. And the mangy doll, in temples you often get mangy dolls in the temple walking around, and they sit down under a tree over there. They think, well, this is nice, I'm under this tree, all is good, and then the itchy skin starts to get them. They scratch, and it gets worse. The more they scratch, the worse it gets. And eventually they go, oh, and they get up and they run away, and they think that spot was no good because I was itching so much, and then they find a new spot under a new tree. They think, oh, this isn't good. And there for a while, it's nice. Then they start itching again. Scratch, 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 scratch. Off they go again. They do that all day long, thinking the problem is the place, not realizing the problem is really the itching is coming from the pain, the illness that they're carrying with them. So wherever they go, it's with them. He said, we're the same. You have negative thoughts making you suffer. You move, they go with you. That person you're angry with moves away, but you still have your angry thoughts, don't you? So what is the modern phenomenon as it would work, and we're always changing jobs. And anyway, Singapore's the same, but in Melbourne, people get a new job. We'll say, really? What's for you? You got a new job. And you meet them 6 months later and they said, you say, how's the job going? And they say, oh, I quit. Why did you quit so quick? Oh, I didn't like something up there, or the time wasn't right, or too much word, whatever. People lose jobs all the time. It won't last very long. So they're like lazy dogs. It itches too much, so you move, you quit your job, try somewhere else, rather than looking at your own mind, looking more deeply, seeing where the attachment is, where the thinking is wrong. You just change places. And it's not just jobs, is it? Partners. You have a partner for a while, and then you meet someone, you say, oh, where's your partner? We split out. Yeah? We were only together for 1 year, 6 months. We split out very quickly now. Not much patience, not much wisdom. As soon as there's a problem, you split easier. We're always moving. Nowadays, everyone, with globalization, we're moving countries. Not happy with Singapore, they'll get a job overseas. Maybe monks are the same. I've moved from England to Thailand, now I'm in Australia. I can't compare it. And monks are the same. Monks move monasteries all the time. They hardly stay in a monastery very long. So maybe they're the same as mangy dogs. Even worse than a mangy dog was the monk who had, Ajahn Chah said, the monk with excrement in his bag. Yes, we have shoulder bags, and I have a shoulder bag here. There's one monk who's always moving from one temple to another, one monastery to another. He's never happy, never peaceful. He's always complaining about each place he went to. He come back to Ajahn Chah. Eventually Ajahn Chah got tired of this, so he said, well, you know what? You're like someone who's some excrement in your bag. The monk hadn't got it. What? Why do you say that? He said, well, because you go to stay in a new place, and then after a while it smells. You think, oh, the smells here is not very good. So you leave, go into a new place. But the excrement is in your bag, so you take the bag with you, so the new place starts to smell as well. And then you leave that and you go somewhere else, and it starts to smell there, because wherever you go, you take your bag with you. So you're like someone with excrement in your bag. It may be quite a coarse kind of metaphor or simile, but it paints the picture, doesn't it? Our mind is a bit like that. If you're angry here, you go over there, your anger goes with you. If you haven't seen it as impermanent, not self, let it go, and go with you wherever you go. If you're jealous, it's not like you get rid of that person, don't have to hear about them, not see them, then you get free from your jealousy. The jealousy is still there, the condition is still there. It may temporarily disappear, but as soon as you hear their name again, up it comes. Competitiveness, conceit, and we're always comparing with other people, better than, same as, worse than. In one day, you may notice your mind as you're more mindful. Maybe in just one day, you're already comparing yourself to someone else. Your work colleague, your family member, your neighbor, another driver on the street. Their car is worse than mine, same as mine, better than mine. We do it all the time. Clothes, you see someone walking in, how are they dressed? Better than me, worse than me, same as me. That's why it's so nice being a monk. Only one kind of clothes, you don't have to compare clothes. You don't sit there saying, oh, he's got a better brand than me. Better color. Hairstyles, monks had only one hairstyle. Life becomes very simple as a monk, very peaceful already, because you strip away a lot of these external things. But as lay people, there's a lot of comparing going on. It's a lot of suffering, isn't it? They've got a better clothes to be, better hairstyle, or worse hairstyle. Conceit is like that. We're always sort of moving up and down. So the Buddha Lupo-Cha encouraged us to see where we're going wrong in our thinking, where our attachments are causing us suffering. Practice awareness, become more aware of this, but look inwards rather than always looking out there. But if you're always looking out there, you only get a very superficial understanding of things. And it doesn't mean to say there's not a role for understanding the world around you, its society. Ajahn Chah actually gave a percentage for this. In Singapore, everyone loves figures, statistics, percentages, numbers. So the number, the magic number is that watch other people 10% of the time. Watch yourself 90% of the time. If you really want to free your mind from suffering, you have to do it that way around. Because what are people doing most of the time? They're looking at other people 90% of the time and looking at themselves 10% of the time. We're actually not very mindful. We're not very aware of what we're thinking, how we feel, all our views and opinions. We miss them. We're caught into that wrong thinking because we're looking out there at other people. So we're gravitate to judging other people, knowing what other people's business is, comparing with them. And then we miss ourselves. So then we find it hard to find peace. People who practice the Dhamma, they're quite happy on their own, or they're happy in other people say. And they know how to be peaceful with themselves, even if they're totally alone. People who are not very immersed in Dhamma, they tend to be always looking at other people and judging other people, and then happiness seems to depend on other people, doesn't it? If other people are nice to me, I'm happy. Other people say nasty things or criticize me, I'm unhappy. That's when you don't have much Dhamma in your mind. We tend to be easily affected by other people's opinions and views about you. If you practice the Dhamma, you start to get some inner refuge, and you're more stable, more happy in yourself. You've actually got more to give to other people. You can help other people, you can support other people better. And what they say is not so important. It doesn't mean to say you don't listen at all, but you listen, but it's not that most important thing, because you're more used to watching yourself and knowing yourself. We have to learn this. That's what Dhamma practice is teaching us, how to know ourselves, depend on ourselves, rely on ourselves. Then you can give more back to other people. If you're always clinging to other people for your happiness, that means your own heart is a little bit empty. And to have more loneliness or suffering. So bring your mind to the Dhamma, practice dana, practice sila, practice bhavana, bring up the Dhamma in your heart. You get a lot of inner happiness. Then life with other people are living the world tends to go better. But you will want more to do. I think time is getting on now, so I'll leave the talk there tonight. And wish you all well in your practice. And then you will find true happiness.